Okay, so we're back here for the second example, and this one you'll have to copy down in your notebooks here. From the top of a canyon, the angle of depression to the far side of the river is 58 degrees, and the angle of depression to the near side of the river is 74 degrees. The depth of the canyon's 191 meters. What is the width of the river X at the bottom of the canyon, round to the nearest tenth of a meter? All right, now in the picture here, you have a lot of things going on. First of all, 191, that is the canyon itself, that's the height. From the top of the canyon, so this is where we're standing, we look straight out, that's our line of sight, and then we cast our eyes downward. Now 58 degrees here is to the far side of the river. But then this place here is the near side of the river, and that is 74 degrees. That is for here. We want this. We want X. Now the problem we're going to run into is the same one we had in the last example. When you trace out that triangle that has X, that's not a right triangle. So I can't use sine, cosine, tangent for that triangle. However, we do have a right angle here, which means we do have right triangles. We do have a distance in the right triangle. We have the 191. So we might be able to do something here. But we have to make a connection first. And the connection is this. The line of sight is parallel to the ground. And when we have parallel lines, we know that alternate interior angles have to be congruent. So if this angle here is 58, so is this one. So that's 58 degrees. And if this is 74, if I trace that out, so is this, is 74. So now we have some information here. If I look at the small right triangle, I'll put this one in red. Even though this doesn't have a variable, we really want X here. But if I call this Y, I can solve for this. I can find this piece. I can do the opposite divided by the adjacent, which is the tangent. I can take the tangent of 74 degrees equals 191 divided by Y, and I can solve that. Now what happens is we get Y times the tangent of 74 degrees equals 191, and then we divide by the tangent of 74. And so it becomes a calculator problem. So 191 divided by the tangent of 74 is equal to 54 point, I'm going to say you could go 0.8, that would be fine. I'm going to say 0.77. And this is meters. Okay, so that's the Y value. Now again, I can't find X yet. However, if I look at, I'll put this in green, there's a second right triangle. There's a big one here. In that right triangle, I know this angle measure. I know the opposite side is 191. The adjacent would be this whole thing. Now I'm going to give that another variable name. I'm going to call that W. And we can say the tangent of 58 degrees equals W, 191 divided by W. Now we're going to get the same situation for solving it as what we had here. So I'm going to multiply W times the tangent of 58, but then I'm going to have to turn around and divide by the tangent of 58. Okay, so you can compare these and see what happened here. I'm going to use the same process. And so we get W is equal to 119.35 meters. Okay, so what we've got here, we've got the whole distance, W is 119.35. We have this piece, 54.77. If I subtract those, This is segment addition postulate. If you add the parts, you get the whole thing. I can take the whole thing, subtract this part, and what I'm left with is the other part, x. So x equals 119.35 minus 54.77 minus 54.77, and we get 64.58 or 64.6 meters. Now this problem was a little bit easier. It may have looked more complicated than the pyramid, but because we were able to actually find these values for y and for w without having to use two variables in the same equation, this was actually a little bit easier. But you had to make the connection. You got to understand, hey, parallel lines means that you have some congruent angles. We have to label. Even if you're not sure what to do, you can always label what you know and ask yourself, what can I find? I couldn't find x right away, but as soon as I labeled 74, wait a minute, I can find this length. I could find this length as well. Maybe we're not sure what we need to do. Find whatever you can, because what happens is finding one thing can lead us to the next step. So by working it out and just attempting something, you help yourself. And that is the end.